All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our Truth and Taxation meeting this evening, Thursday, November 30th of 2023. We're here this evening due to Minnesota statute, and this meeting is being held at 6 o'clock p.m. and after due to the direction of the Minnesota Department of Revenue. We're going to begin this evening with a meeting which is one that includes some information for everyone that's here. And our auditor-treasurer, Brady Powers, has prepared a presentation for us. And we want to thank you for being here and sharing this information.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Oh. There we go. Just the items that we'll be talking about. And this is just what Chairman Ann just spoke of. These are the requirements for the meeting under statute. I'll try and keep this brief. The next slide here is some basic.
Sorry, Brady. It's been advancing by itself. I'm not sure why it's doing that.
Do you want to just run it, or?
I'd actually rather you advance the slides yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
Assuming it doesn't. Yeah.
Okay. Just some basic information. Taxing authorities in Cook County include the county, the school, hospital, city, 3 towns, Economic Development Authority, ARDC, and the state of Minnesota collects local property taxes also. So almost 40% of the property taxes collected in Cook County are for taxing entities other than Cook County, and this includes money too that we collect through fiscal disparities that goes to St. Louis County. More on that later. We know there are disadvantages to the property tax system, probably why you're here tonight. It's a source of local funding. It's complex. There are unfunded state, federal mandates, and taxes may not match the ability to pay. But there are also advantages. Local government is more responsible than state and federal, accountable to the public. That's why you're here tonight. And property taxes are a more stable, reliable source of revenue for local government than other sources of revenue. Is there and more on this later, but there are Board of Review meetings in the spring each year for the county to review with taxpayers the value and classification of their properties. So these come up starting in April, and they're for 2025. So the meetings for this year's taxes, the valuations were last spring. Next page, just some more basic information. This is comparison of 2023 taxes to 2024. Our total expenses are up 23%. The next line, the levy, though, is up 9%. That was our proposed levy in September. And actually, we've whittled that down to about 6.4% at this point. But this is what's the certified numbers in September, and this is all official. This is what went on to your statements that you all got at home, is 9%. But it's going to be less than that. And then the last slide just shows the tax rate in 2023. It's down about 2%. In 2024, more about that later. And then it shows what if there was no levy increase. How low would that tax rate go?
And Brady, we should probably mention, I know there's a lot of information here and it's hard to read.
Yeah.
So we'll post this on the website so folks can see it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not all easy. I'm certainly not a PowerPoint whiz, as you will know as you go through this. So this is just an example of a proposed tax statement. This is a homestead. It's an actual tax statement. The next page here is just a couple of the things to notice on a statement like this. That first line is the county taxes, and that could include a fire district. So your neighbor might be right across the street, but in a different fire district. So everything may be identical, but your taxes could be different because of that. Bigger item down below special taxing districts. In Cook County, it includes the hospital, the Economic Development Authority, and something called Arrowhead Regional Development Commission. This year, the hospital and EDA had very large increases, so a lot of people have been noticing that line and asking questions about it. Under state statute, we can't break those out. It comes up every year, but they haven't approved that yet. Some counties will have 14 special taxing districts, so. A couple other things. This is a homestead property, so there's nothing under state of Minnesota taxes, because homestead doesn't pay that. There's nothing under fiscal disparity, because that's just for commercial, and we don't have tax increments, so nothing under that. This example had an 8.5% increase on their property tax and a 9%, a 10% valuation increase with our proposed 9% levy, so about what you'd expect. You'll see more about that later. The next page is a summary of our proposed budget and levy. These are all our funds on the left side, the expenses, the revenues, the proposed use of fund balance, and then the levy for 2024 came out at $12,645,794. And then that compares to 2023, and it shows you the 9%, which right now we're looking at about 6.4, actually, with more discussion to come with the board. The next page are just some of the things that drives the budget and what we talk about. Every year for several years, we've been talking about our boundary waters, federal in lieu of taxes money. We get 3 sources of federal in lieu. This is the biggest one. And every 10 years, it gets reappraised. In 2019, it was reappraised at 37% less than the previous 10 years. As we know, land values are not going down, they're going up. The 3 counties that get this money protested. Our assessors and administrators met with the Forest Service, and they did reappraise it, but they haven't given us their final decision yet. It doesn't look like it's going to be a whole lot better, but we don't have that final answer yet. And we're holding money back from our budget and holding it in reserve because we may have to pay everything back. They're paying us our regular payment, but we can't use it because when they give us the final decision, we may have to turn that all over to them. We receive news every August of our health insurance costs, and they're scheduled to increase 7.3% in 2024. Last year, they increased 7.5%. The year before that, we had a cut of 9%. So that goes up and down. Usually up, yeah. And beyond, this is probably the only year it was close to, or last year, close to inflation. Usually it's way beyond inflation. Next item, capital improvement planning. We began this in 2022 to address deferred maintenance on county buildings. A 5-year deferred plan was completed in 2023, and the county expects to issue bonds in 2024 to pay the first 2 years of that deferred maintenance cost as determined by the plan. That includes also some professional services for construction management having to do with our possible state bonding grant. Costs and inflation were a major factor, as they were for everyone. They were a factor in our negotiating a 3.5% cost of living increase for employees for 23 and 2024. And then just pick out a couple of departments that had significant increases this year. Management Information Systems Department, their budget reflects the effects of inflation, a growing organization, changing technologies, and an emphasis on security and hybrid remote work. As a result, their software and professional service costs are up almost $50,000 and $35,000 respectively. The county attorney's budget has been affected by the increase in serious offenses, evidenced by the dramatic increase in jury trials for serious offenses in 2023. So an entry-level prosecutor position to aid in court work will allow the county attorney to focus on civil litigation and increase her availability in advising county officials and department heads, and we all look forward to that. Especially the administrator. County levy history, this is from 1989 to 2024, so about almost 35 years. This just illustrates the first column there, 1989 to 2006. This was our actual change in levy from year to year. Up 2%, down 12%, up 3%, 0%, 2, minus 8, 8, 17, 3, 5. So we were all over the map. 25% in 2002, and then negative numbers, low numbers, and then 10%, 10% on the next columns, and so forth. So one of the goals I think since we've got administrators, is to try and get something more consistent so that we don't have the large up and downs. People can feel a little more comfortable with how it's going to change from year to year. And the other column in there says, well, what if, so the average of all these years is 4.4%. And that's simply taking that first number and multiplying by 4.4 every year. And you get down to almost the same number, way over on the right, 12,327,000, which is very close to our 12,645,000. Actually, it's closer to the 6.4% increase. But just shows you 4.4% is, that's been the price of government over the last 35 years in Cook County. Just some information on the relationship of levy and tax rates. So in 2024, our tax value increased about 12.56%. The Cook County proposed levy is 9%. So the tax rate is the county levy divided by the county tax value. So the $12 million levy divided by the $27 million net tax capacity, our tax value, equals a 46.51% proposed tax rate. Last year, it was 11 million levy, 24 million value, a 48% tax rate. So our tax rate went down, even though our levy went up 9%, because the values went up more than the levy did. And so here's an example of the relationship. This is just a sample parcel with, in 2023, at $2,800 of value. The tax rate of 4806 that year, tax of 1345. In 24, if that parcel was just taxed the same value at the new rate, they would pay 1302. If their value increased way over on the right, 6.3%, half of our actual total increase, they would have had a tax of 1384 or an increase of 2.9%. In the fourth column, here's where I assume the value went up exactly the county average. With exactly the county average, the tax then is 8.9%. So if you go up the average of the whole county in your value, you're going to see the tax that the county levies. Now, on the fifth column,
Row.
here's a go ahead.
It's the row. Fifth.
Row, I'm sorry, row. Yes, sorry. The fifth row, the value is assumed to go up 20%. In that case, here's the tax, $1,562, and a 16.1% increase. It just illustrates which side of the county average you fall on. If you fall on dead center, you're going to pay what the county says the tax levy is and the other entities. If you fall on either side of that, you're going to have a better year or a worse year. Commercial properties in Cook County, and especially up here in areas that have fiscal disparity, but all over the state, are just treated significantly different from other properties. This is just illustrating in Cook County how commercial properties are impacted by non-local taxes, particularly fiscal disparity and the state general tax. I won't go into fiscal disparity right now. Suffice it to say it's been around since 1995. It's just for 7 counties in the northeast part of the state and a few counties down in the Twin Cities. So in this scenario here, looking at 2024 versus 2023, here's the local tax base of a particular property. I picked out a property in the city of Grand Marais, left out one small item, a $500 item, because of the space concerns. And it shows you the change in the local tax rate, 93% down to 91. It went down 2%. The tax, however, the local tax went up to $14,000. Fiscal disparity tax went from $4,800 to $6,600 because fiscal disparities is based on an area-wide rate of those 7 counties. Now that fiscal disparity rate went from 170% to 160%. We're a low tax rate county in this 7 county area. Our tax rate is 91 and 93. The area-wide tax rate with all these counties is 160 and 170%. So it generates on the tax statement a fiscal disparity tax for this parcel in 2023 of $8,301 and in 2024 $10,671. And what it's actually doing here is taking the total tax base and which is, look at 2024, the first row, 22,492. The local tax base is 15,802. The fiscal disparity tax base is 6,690. Those two add up to the 22,492. So a large share of this property's value is being taxed at that high area-wide rate. On top of that is the state general tax, which only affects commercial properties and seasonal recreational properties. The state sets that tax rate every year, and they just announce it to us. We put it in the system. And for this property in Grand Marais, it was $5,800 in 2023 and $6,800 in 2024, leaving this property with a $28,000 tax bill in 23 and $31,000 in 2024. The next 2 columns just show what would happen if fiscal disparity went away. For this property, their taxes would go down to $27,000 in 2024 versus $31,000, about a $4,500 decrease, and about a $4,000 decrease in 2023. If you look at the final 2 rows, you see what happens if the state general tax also went away. This commercial property would have paid $18,000 in 2023 and $20,000 in 2024. About a $11,000 difference for that property. So it's a significant burden on commercial properties. I would love to get deeper into fiscal disparities, but I don't know if there are any commercial. If the room was full of commercial taxpayers, we could go deeper into that, but I'll leave it at that. This property tax analysis is just a comparison between 2 years, 2024, 2023, and it shows you the breakdown in the types of properties. What are the number of properties? That's the first 2 columns. For homestead, seasonal rec, non-homestead residential, apartments, resorts, commercial, utilities, other, and then your total numbers at the bottom. And then their taxable value in the 2 years, then their net tax, and then the percentage of the tax paid. So in the top right-hand corner, you see homestead pays about 22% of the taxes in Cook County. Seasonal rec properties pay about 35% in 2024. And then non-homestead residential, which are similar, I would say, to seasonal rec, they're not full-time residents, pays 24%. So they're paying about 59% almost 60% of the taxes, and homestead's paying 22%. Resorts pay about 4%, commercial pays about 8%, and public utilities less than 1%, et cetera. And way at the bottom, tax exempt properties in Cook County, there are more than 33% of our parcels are tax exempt. They have a taxable value of $1,826,000 versus taxable of $2,258,000 and $2,759,000, $2,759,098 in 2024. Just to give you a sense of what we are being paid payment in lieu of tax on. We have a huge tax exempt base.
Ray, I think you meant billion there, unless I misheard.
Correct, I'm sorry. $2,759,098,600. $2 billion. The next page is just an illustration of where our tax dollars go. In the blue box, the county, then the special taxing districts. Oh, I'm sorry. So just an illustration of where our tax dollars go. Cook County, 62%, special taxing districts, 10%, cities and towns, 8%, volunteer fire departments, 2%, the school, 6%, the state general tax, 8%, and fiscal disparities, 4%. And this is, in number form, what you saw on the last page. This is a history, recent years, of all the levying entities in Cook County, city, towns, fire departments, county, etc. And at the very bottom, you see the state general property tax proposed for 2024, $1,784,000 paid by commercial properties and seasonal rec properties, and fiscal disparities paid $1,144,681, which goes to St. Louis County as a part of a tax sharing plan. And the last page is a timeline for property taxes. What this shows is, for the tax statement you received, those values were set on January 2nd, 2023. The County Board of Equalization met last June about these valuations and considered changes, and they're now part of our 2024 tax notice. And then in March, we'll be sending out statements, including the valuation notices, and we'll go through the process again for 2025. And Madam Chair, that's all I have for presentation.
Well, thank you very much. It was
Well, I-
very thorough, and one thing I want to compliment you on is adding the piece for commercial properties, because that's really important to a lot of our businesses, and very glad you did that.
Yeah, and it's a very complex issue, but I'm hoping that commercial properties that, are interested in that, it will stimulate them to ask more questions. This is something that may change in coming years.
Absolutely. All right, well, thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could, we have one other presentation. There's always a lot of confusion between or about the relationship between property valuations and what your tax bill ends up being. There's, I think, an understanding that if you have an increase in valuation, you will automatically be paying more in taxes, and that is not true. And Brady alluded to that earlier. But we have an illustration to maybe make that a little bit clearer. So I'm going to get that presentation out for Bob here.
So Bob Thompson is here with us as our assessor, and one of the things he did last year was create a tool that helps all of us better understand this, and that's what he's going to present this evening.
All right, I'm Bob Thompson, for those of you that I haven't met yet. And today I'm just going to give a quick presentation. I do have a similar timeline that Brady showed relating to, when you get your valuation notice for your payable 24 taxes. That came back in the end of March or early April. Little yellow piece of paper, it came with the tax statement. Unless you just recently purchased your property, you would have got this with the tax statement back in the spring. But this just kind of lays out, the sales study period that predates the valuation date. People oftentimes, when they talk about their assessed value, they oftentimes tell me that the assessed value is far less than what it's worth, and that's just the way it's always done, and they think that it's intentional. But in reality, when you're looking at, say, your October tax statement for 2023, that value is based off of a sale or a number of sales that could have occurred, 16 months earlier. So it's just a lag in the sales study process for setting that assessment. And then a lot of people also don't realize when you're paying your taxes, it's based on the value of the prior year. So it's always a year behind. There's an assessment year and then a tax year. So I do have some handouts if anybody wants a copy of that. They're in the back of the room.
This will also be posted on the website.
Yep, this will also be posted. I also have some videos on my website where I talk through this, and then I also have a lot more additional detail on top of this. But basically, this presentation is going to show you very basic concepts. Brady obviously went through that. There's a number of different taxing authorities, and there's a number of different levies and different things that are moving pieces, so it's really hard to illustrate all of those moving pieces, but this is going to show the valuation portion of how your property taxes are impacted, and it doesn't cover everything. So this is just so you can wrap your head around it, a hypothetical town of just 4 homes, and in that town, the county's budget or the city's budget to operate is only $4,000. So if all of those houses were valued at $100,000, the taxes would be split 4 ways. They're all, assuming they're all classified the same, like a homestead, they would split that $4,000 operating expense between the 4 of them. So now, if I were to, or if this town, the market values doubled, the EMV goes up to $200,000, but if that budget remained at the $4,000, they're still just splitting that $4,000 budget to operate. We don't actually collect more money when that value goes up unless we increase this levy and the operating expenses. So this will illustrate something that's more common, where you have different types of properties appreciating at different rates. So in the first scenario here, the lakeshore home is worth twice as much as the non-lakeshore homes. As a result of that, they pick up $1,600 of the $4,000 levy, and the remaining 3 homes pick up the other $800 apiece. So if those are appreciating at a different pace, so in this example, the waterfront property went up 20%, and the non-waterfront properties all went up 7%. This is something that actually happens. It's very common. Different types of properties go up at different rates. Now you can see that the tax burden has somewhat shifted to that property that went up 20% and shifted away, and actually those properties that saw a 7% value increase are now seeing a reduced tax liability in that $4,000 budget. So this just goes into basically the same description I just said with some percentages. So with that 20% value increase, this property is seeing a 7% tax increase from that shifting, and then the other 3 properties are seeing a 4.6% decrease in their taxes. But all of this is assuming that there's no additional expenses. I have a number of other scenarios for this 4-house town where, if you double the budget, or if you cut the values in half, or, if one value gets reduced and the others remain the same, how it just kind of shifts around. But this just is a general concept that shows all of the tax base is splitting up the cost to operate the government. So the impact can be from not only valuation changes at different rates, but also the increases in the expenses for the government. So just a couple of takeaways here. The first step in the process is that the legislature, they set all the classification rates, they set all the special programs, exemptions, they determine who's eligible, and then they set kind of the parameters for how properties are valued, and you know, they set the criteria that the assessed values have to be within 90 to 105% of the sales. So they set all the rules, and then the assessor goes in and, you know, does, according to the Property Tax Administrator's Manual and the state statutes, applies those valuation methodologies. That's the first step in the process. We send out those yellow valuation notices, and then it goes to the budget planning process. So the county, the schools, the cities, all of these different taxing authorities determine how much they're going to need for the following year, and then they send out that truth in taxation estimate based on those estimated budgets. And then the very last piece of the pie is when you get your tax statement. That will come, you know, next April with the finalized levy numbers and the valuations that have all been established prior. And I do have just this last slide with my phone number. So there may be people here who want to talk about their value. This really isn't the appropriate meeting, but we certainly will still, you know, have a conversation about it. I have a sign-in sheet in the back or one up front if you're going to come up and do public comment. Just leave your name and number if you have a valuation concern.
Okay, thank you. So at this point in time, we're going to give an opportunity for members of the public to speak if they wish. And what I'd ask you to do is come forward to the microphone. There's a sheet there where you can sign in your name and address. And would members of the public like to come forward? Jim.
Could Bob explain briefly the quintile issue, because it will tend to sometimes show large increases in one part of the county that are out of sync with other parts, and I don't think people understand that they're reassessing a fifth of the county every year.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I could, I'll just, a brief, what I think Jim is trying to describe is that as we rotate through our quintiles, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, we have been kind of playing catch up. There have been properties that, you know, we come across and something just isn't right with the way that they're putting the land description down, or, you know, it's undergraded, or it's had improvements and updates. So when we come through, which we do once every 5 years, we're supposed to visit your property. During a quintile year, you might tend to see a bigger increase than a non-quintile year. As our assessment improves, that's going to be less common. So, you know, I've been here, I'm going on to my 5th year as county assessor. So, you know, now that accountability starts to fall on just one person, whereas if you're looking back 5 years ago, there were 3 different assessors in the quintile cycle. So, you know, the accountability, I think, really starts to fall on somebody once they've been through more than 5 years. You know, you start getting into 10 years and you really have to take accountability. So there should be less of that, you know, quintile specific increase that seems to sometimes be at a higher percentage or a higher amount. We just went through the Gunflint Trail for 23. For the 24 assessment, we did the Hovland Portage area. Next year, we're going to be doing Greater Grand Marais, so that's basically everything from Isaac Hansen's all the way up to the Kelly's Hill Road, and then it excludes Grand Marais. It basically goes up to 2 Island. And then we'll do Grand Marais the last year, and then we'll start over again in the West End. So the West End, the Gunflint Trail, Hovland Portage, they're not going to see a big change. The city of Grand Marais, I feel like for the most part, is kind of up to par where it needs to be. You know, Greater Grand Marais next year, it's going to be kind of something that they might see in pockets where, you know, if something was misrepresented or undervalued in past assessments, it's going to catch up a little bit. You know, it'll get closer to that market value for the properties that are further from it.
All right, well, thank you so much, we appreciate that. One thing is, we have public comment, we occasionally have people who send in an email that they would like to read. Are there members of the commission or Administrator Yorkie who might have a comment to read?
Madam Chair, I did have one email that I'd like to read this evening. This comes from Paul Coe, who writes, many taxpayers are concerned about the increasing cost of our county's government. The proposed levy of 6.54%, and I should clarify, Brady referred to a 9% preliminary levy, which the board approved in September. Through some subsequent edits to the budget, we've reduced that to 6.54%. The proposed levy of 6.54% doesn't accurately reflect the actual increase in expenditures. With the approved EDA levy request, the increase is closer to 8%. If American Rescue Plan Act dollars and fund balance dollars had not been used, the increase would have been 20.6%. The county's various revenue sources are increasing by $595,835. Without those increases, the levy would have been 25.6%. Interest rates may come down in the future, which would reduce some of the various revenue sources. Last year, the use of fund balance dollars kept the levy at 5.5%. If the fund balance had not been used, the levy would have been 22% for 2022. That would equal a 47.6% increase in the levy in a 2-year period. Fund balance dollars are limited. American Rescue Plan dollars were a one-time payment. What happens when those dollars run out? Next year, the county will be implementing a capital improvement plan. Actual construction costs always seem to run higher than estimated. Unplanned expenses seem like they always come up. For example, the recent water intrusion / mold issue at the courthouse. We know housing is important, but is a 124% increase in the Housing and Redevelopment Authority budget on top of the $700,000 of American Rescue Plan dollars they recently received needed this year. The EDA levy increase for 2024 is 66%. Additional staff is being hired. Most of the updated job descriptions are resulting in higher pay grades. Some commissioners want to increase their compensation. All these things are going to drive expenditures and the levy higher. We appreciate that the Sheriff's Department and the Social Service Department just reduced their levy request. However, the Sheriff's Department is temporary and will increase when their vacant positions are filled. The current rate of growth in expenditures is not sustainable, and levies will become unaffordable for some residents. We encourage you to carefully review the budget and reduce expenditures. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Are there any other commissioners who have emails that they need to share? All right. At this time, then, we'll ask members of the public who are here in the commissioners' room to come forward to the microphone. Again, remember to sign in with your name and address, please.
But not all at once.
Any members of the public who would like to speak this evening? We have a brave soul.
Yeah, I was like, someone has to go.
Welcome.
My first time, so. Hi. My name's Elise. I newly living in Grand Marais. I've been living in Lake County, near Finland, off-grid in the woods. And we live both places now. My son goes to GES. So, it's increased 50.5%. So my tax, the number that you showed was 8.6 in the example. Mine says 50.5. So I think it has something to do with some of the things that have been said. But I guess it's a good example of a question. Like, wow, that's a lot. And I understand it would not be the same every year, that the disparities you've been talking of happen, so I might be much luckier next year, but I was just wondering a little bit like, oh, what is this going towards? So thanks for the presentations. They were helpful. There's a lot of information. I could not take that all in, but yeah, can you say something about like, oh, that's something to expect every other year, or, you know, just is that a normal thing? Thanks.
No, it's not a normal thing. I don't think anyone at any level of income or value could stand that kind of increase every year. But, yeah, I'd love to hear from you and be able to take a look and see what's driving it, if you could give me a call.
I will.
And, yeah, we do see increases like that every year. There's always a few that get hit by various, I couldn't even guess, because there's so many possibilities.
Yeah.
Something that large is, would take some change in the classification or valuation, or, because it's not, none of the levies are that large to be like that. So you could call me, and you might start with Bob, because that's likely that
Great. Yeah,
it's
I will.
something, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Someone's-
But, yeah, but then he can send you on to me on the tax issues.
Thank you.
Did you write your name and address?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, my name is June Tavikram. I'm at 332 South Shore Drive, and my taxes went up 52% this year. So I have a similar concern. Most of it appears to be the valuation that went up 47%. But I thought I just heard in these presentations that the tax increase, it's a function of the valuation compared to other valuations that presumably also went up because housing costs have been rising dramatically in the county, as we all know, from the last, 5-6 years. So given that everybody else's valuations have probably also gone up, I am trying to figure out why mine went up by over 50%. It seems absurd. So I guess I'll also be contacting either Brady or, I'm sorry, I forgot your name, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm Ashley Bredemis, and this is my husband, Victor Pilon, and we live at the very end of the Gunflint Trail. We have 3 parcels of land, and 2 of them, well, one of them is the one that we homestead, and we're fine with that. That's a 4.6% increase. But one of them increased 155%, and the other 111%. And I think we'll probably be talking with you, Bob, because I think it's all in the market value raised so much, but so perhaps this isn't the right setting, but we wanted to still bring it up anyways. We don't have road access where we live. It's not like,
We don't have a well. like
none of
this.
our buildings are on concrete pads, so,
But we have 2 different
Yeah.
parcels, so one is labeled as a resort and the other is a, I forget the name of it.
yeah,
but
the
it's-
one is resort and the other is a rural vacant, non-homesteaded, so.
And that's the
anyways.
one that increased by 155%. It just was alarming to see is all. And we were just concerned.
Thought we'd come and bring it up.
Yeah.
Can I ask a
Is that
clarifying
something
one?
you normally see? Like 155% seems different from 55%, so.
There are a lot of different factors, and I would just encourage you to talk to Bob about all 3 parcels, so you have an opportunity to get that
Yeah.
information. He has some business cards back there for you.
Thank you.
It's too hard to generalize. It could be
Yeah, I'm
so
sure.
many things.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks for
Appreciate
being
you.
Appreciate you coming all this way.
Yeah, happy to.
Did you get the ice boat out?
We're walking over the land now, so yeah, the big barge is out, so.
The ice boat will hopefully we
And,
can-
oh, the ice boat, Dan's ice boat?
Yeah.
He'll bring it up this year.
Are there other members of the public that wish to speak this evening? Any other members of the public who wish to speak? Going once? Oh. All right.
My name's Jim Boyd, and I wanted to comment on something that Brady said. Minnesota has the most complicated property tax system in the country by far. And two of those complications are things that Brady touched on, the state general tax and fiscal disparities. Both should not be in our state tax system at all. The general tax was an agreement made by the Minnesota Chamber to do the state general tax in lieu of doing something else that benefited mostly the businesses in the Twin Cities, and we suffer the result. The fiscal disparities is, I told Ann and the others the other day that it's frequently referred to as Tommy Rukavina's revenge. He hated sending those taconite tax benefits to Cook County. We're grandfathered in because of Tack Harbor, but he really resented that. So they created this fiscal disparities. They copied it from the area around the Twin Cities, so that where Bloomington, for example, has to share its tax benefits with Richfield, a landlocked, not very prosperous first-ring suburb. So they copied that, but to make it work, they had to exclude Duluth. So it's not all of northeast Minnesota. It's really all the benefits go to St. Louis County. So we're all paying money to St. Louis County. And people I'm now able to say the quiet part out loud because I'm just a retired citizen, but people have been afraid to bring that up because they don't want to jeopardize the many benefits we get from the taconite fees collected on the minerals that are extracted. And if you net it out, if you look at all of the benefits from that and deduct the fiscal disparities payments, we do well. But it's really, I think it's time to challenge that. It is a horrible thing. And I think it's important for business owners to realize that if you look at your tax bill, I think the last time I checked, it was 53% of that bill is based on decisions made in St. Paul for the general tax, state general tax, and fiscal disparities. And I think that it's time you challenge those, because there's not a thing you can do that would balance up the tax on business and the tax on residences. I don't see any way you can do that. So that's the explanation of why those business tax bills are high.
And I agree. There may be reasons to reduce our benefits from taconite, because we don't, as you say, we don't have a mine, we don't generate a lot of that. But you could find a much better way to do it if you wanted to, policy-wise make a change in that than to impose this statute and all this complexity on the tax system, along with the state general. You could accomplish, that came into effect in 2002, I think. We did quite well without it, by taxing in a different way, much simpler way. That just became a very complicated. We have two complicated things that make it almost impossible. Taxes were hard to understand prior to these two programs, and it's almost impossible now, especially for commercial properties, to come in here and say, hey, what are you guys doing with my levy? Because you can't make sense of the whole of the
And I
system.
personally, just my opinion, but I've done a fair amount of research on the fiscal disparities. My personal opinion is that you don't risk losing those taconite tax benefits. They're written into law that they're based on what was going on in the taconite industry, I believe on January 1st of 1988, when Tack Harbor was operating. we have since not, but we're grandfathered in to that date. And so, by the way, are a bunch of other communities that are no longer participating in the mining as well. So if they want to take us out, they've also got to take out a lot of other communities that are going to resist. So it's like when Jimmy Carter decided to take away a lot of water projects in a bunch of congressional districts. My friend from Idaho, Cecil Andrus, was his Secretary of the Interior. He said, don't do that. Pick one or two. Don't pick 34 because they're going to kill you. And, so you would have a lot of allies in defending, keeping the taconite benefit without the fiscal disparities. Because it's a horrible system, I think. And remember, almost all the money goes to St. Louis County. And every time I drive by that Super One and Target and Menards and all in Virginia, I go, our commercial tax base is sending money to St. Louis County? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, here's the total numbers, including 2024. When we get done paying the 2024 fiscal disparity, we'll have sent $12,861,000, mostly to St. Louis County. The biggest hit goes to Itasca, though, because their big industrial city, Grand Rapids, is included, while Duluth is not, and they've sent $44,647,000. Lake County has sent $13,917,000. Crow Wing is broken even, basically. St. Louis County has received $76,325,000.
76 million?
$76 million, and Koochiching County has received $6,900. So
It's a broken system. Thank you. Thanks for listening to me.
Thank you. Are there other members of the public that wish to speak this evening?
Don't want to really do this, but hi, my name's Jerry Person, and I just live a few blocks from here. My question is, and I'm trying to learn more about this because it's definitely impacting my life. A single income, and I bought my house 10, 12 years ago. And, just even doing that on a single income was challenging enough, but I made that happen. And now it seems like because everything is wrapped into my escrow, that my mortgage payment keeps going up and getting to the point where it's going to be kind of a hardship. And it was supposed to be my retirement investment and all that. Maybe that's not the right way of looking at it. But I guess what I want to know is, what can I do down the line? I'm trying to learn all about this, right, Brady? So that I can stay in the house and not, it's doubled in value, assessed value, I think, if that's right. I don't think I've done double the improvements on the house, so. And I appreciate that it's gone up in price, but I'm not willing to sell it. And I guess I want to know, what should I be doing? What can I do? What to stay in the house? Let it go down in value so I can afford it, or, So I'll probably be coming to more meetings, just trying to learn more about all this. But if I get some direction into, the next 4 or 5 years, what I can do to afford my house, that would be great.
have you looked at the state refund? That's an option every year. Yeah.
State refund?
Well, give me a call on that.
Okay.
It's not that generous unless your income is really low, but.
I'm trying not to have a low income.
Yeah, I know. So. So it's not super generous, but it could help some. And a small thing, next year, not this coming year, but the next one, they did for the first time that exclusion. You still get exclusion on your property tax as a homestead.
Oh.
There's a market value exclusion,
Okay,
I don't know what your value is. It could be as much as 30,000 if you're really low value, and then it drops down, so it's probably 20 something. I'm just guessing.
I have a lot to learn.
But they increased that for the first time since they put that into effect. So it's been 20-some years. They haven't changed it. They set, the peak was at 76,000. Like, that was like an average, low average value house when they set this. That isn't even remotely close to a low average house today. And this is the first time they've changed that number. So there'll be a little bit of relief.
Okay. So
Thank you for sharing that.
Take a look at a few things, and I probably want to talk about it too, and.
There's also a state program, and I don't, age, I'm not sure if you would qualify, but there's a senior property tax deferral. And I know that in the past, it's been really hard for people to qualify for that because they wanted 15 years of residency, and low income and all these things, but I think they are trying to loosen that up so more people will qualify. But effectively what that does is, the day you enroll, it locks your taxes at that amount. They'll never go up. And there's a deferred amount of taxes that that the county would then keep track of. And upon selling the house or passing away, then the taxes would have to be paid back or brought current. But that was a program that the legislature set up for, the aging, single income, or somebody who is having troubles paying those increasing tax amounts. They can just freeze it at that current year when they apply. So maybe in the future, it could be something that you would look at too.
Okay, so that's what I kind of would like to know, more programs and what can I do, so.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for coming this evening. Anyone else who would like to speak? Or come back to speak?
June Tavikram again, and I just have a quick question. Most places I've lived, and I've moved around a lot in my life, have the states or the localities have had a cap on how much property taxes, how much more you have to pay year to year, so that if you get a big increase in one year, it has to be phased in over several years so that nobody gets a huge increase all at once. And I'm wondering if Minnesota has any such law. I do not. Bummer.
The closest thing, they did have a limited market value law when I got here, 30-some years ago, and then they phased it out by I can't remember the exact date, but it was end of the 90s, early 2000 is when that phased out. It was like it could only go up, depended either 12 or 15%. So if you got a 150% calculated increase, it wouldn't go to that. It was limited to that 15.
Yeah, that was
Or
the kind of
12,
thing I was
yeah.
used to seeing, not necessarily that number, but some kind of a limit year to year. Okay, so Minnesota doesn't have that. The only thing then that Minnesota has, it sounds like, was the one senior thing, if you're low enough income, and then that piece of paper you can file with the Minnesota income tax to try to get a partial property tax
Yeah.
refund. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? Other comments?
And there's two actually programs for the refund. And let's say you just have a low income, and then you can apply for that every year and you'll get something back, depending on how low your income is. But then there's another one that really could help anybody. If you have a big increase in one year, even if you don't have a super low income, you could still, it's worth it, so.
Well, I appreciate all the members of the public coming out this evening to speak to us and inform us. And I want to thank Assessor Thompson and Auditor Power Treasures for being here and providing us with a lot of insight. It's really helpful. All right. Thank you so much. We'll close our Truth and Taxation event this evening. Thank you again for coming.
Thanks for putting that commercial stuff together. I think it's good to